Miami Grand Prix is all done and dusted, and it was a highly eventful race. I, for one, could not stay in my seat. It was great. Loads of overtaking, loads of action, loads of stuff to talk about, which is why even though poor old Ammar is off dropping his kids off at school, I am here to talk to you about my thoughts, and we'll try and get both of us together to talk about everything Miami. But there are three things that I wanted to try and touch on today before we get going. So on my to-do list today are number one, to go through some of the overtaking incidents and try and adjudicate for the stewards as we did before, and let you guys have thoughts about what you think should have happened. Second is to have a little think about Ferrari. What the hell? Come on, Ferrari. And thirdly is to talk about McLaren. Perhaps not in that order, but let's just have a little look. So, first of all, let's have a look at some overtaking. There were controversial incidents in both the sprint race and the race proper, but I'm going to divide these up into overtakes on the inside and overtakes on the outside. So I'm going to start off with overtakes on the inside. I've got two to look at. Before we get into the actual incidents, I've got a couple of pictures. Let's have a look at what the rules or guidelines currently say. So here we go. Overtaking on the inside. For overtaking on the inside of a corner, a driver must be given room if they satisfy the following conditions: have their front axle at least alongside the mirror of the other car no later than the apex of the corner, be driven in a safe and controlled manner throughout the manoeuvre, which includes entry, apex and exit, be able to make the corner within track limits. Okay, so we need to make sure that each of these incidents fulfill all of those criteria for a move to either be okay or not. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. So move number one, this is in the sprint race, Oscar Piastri versus Kimi Antonelli. Kimi Antonelli starts the race off on pole, shoots away. Oscar Piastri gets into the inside, so he is now trying to overtake Kimi Antonelli on the inside of that corner. So let's see how that plays out. This is shot one. This is them at the apex. Kimi Antonelli just on the outside, Oscar Piastri on the inside. I think the apex is roughly where that orange blob is, and I think it's quite difficult to call here actually, because Oscar's front axle is behind Kimi's front axle. It's quite tricky to see where his mirror is. Is it on his side pod? I don't know. It's tough. Let's have a look at another angle. Right, this isn't on board. Bit blurry. It was raining though, so that's my excuse. And what you can see here is here's mirror, and here's front axle. And I would argue that these two are roughly in line. So for me, that is Oscar Piastri's corner. He has his front axle alongside Kimi Antonelli's mirror by the time they reach the apex, and this is how ultimately it played out. Again, apologies for the blurriness, but there's Kimi Antonelli on the runoff shouting that he's been pushed off. But I would argue that actually in this instance, Oscar Piastri has fulfilled all of the criteria needed. He had his front axle alongside the mirror of the car he was trying to overtake, and he was able to keep his car on track throughout the entire move. That's his corner, so he doesn't have to give it back, and that's what the stewards decided. 1 for 1. Let's have a look at number two. So this is in the actual race. This is Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen going into turn 11, the left-hander at the end of the long straight towards the end of sector 1. So Lando's got the quicker car. He is gunning to go down the inside of Max Verstappen's Red Bull. And here we go. Off-board shots only. This is shot number one, roughly at the apex. Again, that orange blob on the inside of the corner. And I think we can all clearly see that Lando Norris has his car actually ahead of Max Verstappen. I don't think that's too controversial. So at this point, this is Lando's corner. But on the exit, this happens. And I think that white line closest to the track denotes track limits. If you're across that, then you're not within track limits. I think that Lando has completed this move off the track and therefore does not fulfill the final part of the conditions for overtaking on the inside, i.e. he did not complete the move on track. And therefore, in my view, he has to give that back. And that is ultimately what McLaren do. They weren't asked to do it. You didn't hear them get a penalty from the stewards. But I think if Lando had not given that position back into turn 17 at the end of the lap, I think he probably would have had a penalty coming. So I think, again, the rules, guidelines have worked on this occasion. Right, let's have a look at some moves on the outside. So here are the rules for overtaking on the outside. So for a driver to be given room when overtaking on the outside, including at the exit of the corner, the overtaking car must have the front axle at least alongside the front axle of the other car at the apex of the corner and to the exit. Be driven in a safe and controlled manner throughout the manoeuvre, entry, apex and exit, and be able to make the corner within the track limits. So let's have a look at the two moves I want to look at here. So the first one is probably the least high profile of the lot. This is Liam Lawson going around the outside of Fernando Alonso in the sprint race. Again, pretty wet. And here we go. This is at the apex of turn 11 again. Apologies for the blurry shot. And you can see that Liam probably has his front axle roughly alongside Fernando. It's not miles off, but it's difficult to see from that angle, I think. This is it from the onboard shot, and I think that I don't think he has it quite alongside. This is the orange blob on the inside of the corner, denoting what I think is the apex, and I think that Fernando is ahead here. Liam's front axle isn't quite alongside, so I'm not sure that he's actually entitled to room here. And as we play forward again, Fernando takes that as being the correct interpretation and is happy, despite being on full lock, as you can see here, ending up pushing Liam to the edge of the track and off it ultimately. We all know how that ended up. Liam Lawson was off the track, came back on it again, and bashed Fernando in the side and ended his race. Penalty for that? I think that's probably the right move, given that Liam's front axle was not actually alongside Fernando's at the apex, and therefore I think that's Fernando's corner. He doesn't have to give Liam any room on the outside. Doesn't. Liam then comes back off the track and knocks Fernando out. So I think that's a penalty. The stewards agreed. Also gave Liam Lawson a penalty for that one. Right, final one. This is the one that is probably the most contentious, although I don't think it is for me. This is Lando Norris, lap 1 of the race proper. We're out of turn 1 already. We're heading towards turn 2. Lando here is on the outside of the corner. You can see the curbing up here. So this is Lando and Max approaching that corner. I think at this point Lando's probably still just about behind, but I think if he's got decent acceleration, this is a good time as any to go for the move. Now here we are at what I think is just about approaching the apex of this corner. Now Max has slid wide a little bit. I think he's just had that little oversteer moment, or is just about to. But you can see very clearly here that Lando's front axle is not alongside Max's, and therefore I think this becomes Max's corner. Lando needs to get out of it one way or the other. Ultimately, I don't think he has any time because Max continues to push him off. Here we go. And Lando ends up in the runoff. But should Max have got a penalty for pushing him off? I think that was the contention that Lando had. It was the contention that I think even the commentators, Martin Brundle and David Croft, had in the moment. But I think when you really analyse it and look at what type of corner it was, because it was an overtake on the outside, Lando had to have his front axle at least alongside Max's to be allowed room on the exit. he did not do that, and therefore he was not entitled to run on the exit. He got pushed off, and there wasn't a penalty. I think that was what I would do. I don't think he should have got a penalty for it, and I think the stewards agreed with me as well, and we're happy to leave that as a racing incident. Whew, right, there you go. That's 4 incidents. I think we're going to keep doing these for a little bit longer until we have absolutely learned the rules and regulations. But the fun thing is that these moves keep happening, so we've got plenty of practice. What do you guys think, though? Let us know in the comments. There's a bit of a dichotomy, I think, between the fact that the rules are really prescriptive now, and shouldn't we just allow them to race? Yes, but I think that then leads to a lot of controversy about inconsistency, and we don't know what the rules are. So I think it's a case of you can't have both things. I, for one, I'm happy that we have some regulations and something to guide us when we're looking at these moves, not just based on a whim. And the fact that the drivers all signed up to this makes them even more legit, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to Ferrari. And as if by magic, he must have heard the bat sign, the Ferrari sign, the prancing horse sign. Here is the one and only Ammar. Hey, man, what's up?
I find it fitting that you brought me in just for the Ferrari part.
Now, I'm going to hold on to you for the McLaren bit as well, but I thought this would be quite interesting.
Oh man,
I think that giant Ferrari that you have sitting above your head, you should pick it up and just chuck it out the window. Stamp on it a few times first. What the heck's
I had
going
to
on?
I had to sell a kidney to buy that, so I'm not doing that just yet.
Buy
But
that
yeah,
kidney
they have
back.
me then. I buy that kidney back. I know you can do it. Uh I don't know. I don't know where do you want me to start, Shez? Well, you tell me. What
Well,
do you want me
okay.
to do?
So I've
I
got
mean,
a couple of things. So just to paint the picture. Uh,
really, paint it blue with HP.
yeah, I'm not going to start that far back, although that was also a little bit of a misstep, I thought.
Really, a little bit.
But it's all. Look, I think there is a symptom at the middle of, in the heart of Ferrari that keeps leading to these things happening. But I'm going to let you rant for a second after I've summarised, and then I'll tell you what I think. But the bare bones of it are that for the race proper, Charles Leclerc qualified 8th, Lewis Hamilton qualified 12th. He was knocked out in Q2, but less than a 10th away from his teammate. That speaks, I think, to the to how close the grid is at the moment. But it also speaks to the fact that you cannot have even the slightest pace deficit to your teammate without it resulting in a massive difference in where you line up on the grid. Lewis starts the race on hards, gets a cheeky VSC, switches over to the mediums, is on a quick strategy. He's going for it. He's got past Esteban Ocon, which for me actually was another great bit of racing in this race that was absolutely full of great racing moments. And then he's charging down Charles Leclerc, gets there, thinks, right, I should be able to be let past my own teammate. I mean, come on, I'm on the faster strategy, aren't I? But turns out that Ferrari aren't going to do that. They're going to get back to him. A variation on the usual we are checking. And 3 or 4 laps later, Charles Leclerc finally gets the call to move over, which he does immediately, much to the chagrin of Lewis Hamilton, who has been recommending that his Ferrari strategy team take a tea break or perhaps ask him to let Carlos Sainz go past. He eventually has burned through his medium tyres, having sat behind Charles Leclerc, lost all of the goodness that was in them, and therefore can't then attack Kimi Antonelli, and Charles Leclerc, back in his DRS within a lap or two, is asked to go back past again, and Charles, on his hard tyres, which are now up to temperature and working as they should, attacks Kimi Antonelli, but there are too few laps. He ends up 1.5 seconds behind, with Lewis Hamilton fending off a mighty Carlos Sainz lunge into the final corner on the last lap, which I have to say, again, was a super bit of driving, I thought, from Lewis Hamilton to stop himself ending up in the wall or worse. So, there you go. What do you reckon, Ammar? This was a strategy masterclass, wasn't it?
Which part do you want me to reckon? I mean, because even in everything you described, there's like five things that are wrong. Like very easily, you could do this. Like, I don't know where to start, Chess. I don't, and I
Well,
appreciate you doing the recap,
let's
but
start with Fred Vasseur, okay?
oh,
Because I've just told you that um, Lewis Hamilton was stuck behind
again,
Charles
just
Leclerc for 3, 4 laps. I think it was 3 laps in the end, and it was pretty clear both to Lewis in the car, ultimately to Charles when he was told, and to everyone watching that on that tyre, Lewis just needed to be let past. This is what Fred Vasseur had to say. He said, look, it didn't take so long. It was 1.5 laps or something like this. When we have two cars not with the same strategy, the first thing to understand if it's faster when you're behind due to the DRS or not. It took us 1 lap. It means that it's 1 minute 30 to understand, and then we asked them to swap. Yeah, he carries on actually, but honestly, perhaps you can argue at the end that we would have been better to do it directly, but we didn't know if it was a DRS effect or not. Okay, so what was absolutely crystal clear to the whole world clearly was not crystal clear to Ferrari, but perhaps they know something we don't. Ammar, tell me, what is it that Ferrari know that we do
I
not?
don't. I mean, I would say they all need to be drug tested, but it hasn't affected their performance positively. So, I mean, they clearly are on something, and Fred is probably leading the charge there very well. I am tired of Fred Vasseur. I really am. I'm tired of him doing this
Shameless plug for the
gaslighting thing in
podcast,
the.
by the way.
Yes, yes. Well, but yes, fair enough. I am tired of doing this, listening to him gaslighting all of us. 1.5 lap, Shez? 1.5 lap? Are you kidding me? Fred, which race were you watching? Were you watching? I don't even know what you're talking about there. I just don't even understand what's going on there. Like Fred, wake up, wake the hell up. And Lewis was wrong in saying take a tea break, take a coffee break, take an espresso break. I mean, I don't even care. Do some drugs that are banned. Just wake the hell up. Shez, there was no reason to wait for the DRS. As you eloquently stated in that recap, Lewis switched strategies when the virtual safety car happened, and he was on a faster strategy at that point, right? And Charles was in the hard. You didn't need anyone else to give you any other data to tell you, oh yeah, well, go ahead, just go ahead. It makes all the sense in the world. I don't understand what they're doing here. And my God, I heard that. We'll get back to you, and it literally blew my mind. It blew my mind that they had to check and come back. And whether it was 1 lap, 1.5 lap, 2 laps, or 3 laps, it was too many. It should have been zero. As soon as Lewis was within Charles's DRS window, that call should have happened. Maybe even arguably before. Say, hey, let him through. He's on a different strategy. By the way, and one more thing to clean up, Shez, they never communicated any of this with Charles until the very end of whatever that they were going to do that switcheroo. And Charles obliged rightly. He obliged without putting up any sort of resistance to it. Which, and honestly, given how Lewis felt in the car at the moment and what he said about what he did in China, that could have led to a driver's spat that had nothing to do with either of them. Shez, need I remind you, they were both P7 and P8 at that point. And Ferrari are acting like that was a race win on hand. They really are. They just I don't understand. Like neither driver would have bothered switching 5 times if they had to do that. And I just do not understand what they're thinking. I mean, honestly, like being one of us in onto the strategy team will do a better job. Like seriously, I have had it with them. I really have. There's no way to explain that. Their strategy team sucks. So if you thought there was any, by the way, I just want to say this because you might give some credit to the strategy team on Saturday for winning the sprint. Absolutely not. Lewis made the call to go on slicks and to go on soft tires, which it was his right call. And secondly, they had nothing to lose at that point. So it's not like they pulled off a strategy masterclass. It is just purely coincidental. So anything they have won is coincidental. I cannot deal with them anymore.
Oof. All right. Before Ammar becomes so red, he becomes an optional color for a Ferrari road car. I do want to get into a couple of things. To Lewis, I'll come back to at the end. I'm not happy, particularly with Lewis's performance. There's a little bit of where did the old Lewis go in that, but I I think actually that little exchange between Lewis and Ricardo Adami, where he says, "Am I going to be sitting here behind Leclerc for the rest of the race. I'm burning up my tyres. And Ricky says, we'll get back to you. So that for me is just, as usual, a variation on we are checking. And I was really thinking about this over the last sort of 12 hours or so. Where does this we are checking come from? The Ferrari for the longest time have had a problem where they are constantly worried. Individual members of the team, individual groups within the team are worried that they are going to be punished, fired, whatever, for doing the wrong thing. Fred Vasseur already is being criticised, and there's already a little lobby for him to be ousted. And we know how powerful the Italian media are. If we think that Ammar getting angry and criticising Fred is bad, you should just hear what Gazzetta dello Sport are going to be saying. So there's always this paranoia within the team that if we make a mistake, things are going to go wrong for me as an individual, us as a team. And we are checking as a massive symptom of that. Like, they don't want to make a decision right there and then because they don't want to take a risk. But two things about that. The first is that I don't think you can make a decision within Formula One, within the confines, the heat of battle that is a Formula One race, that is completely risk-free. You have to have an element of risk. That's why we keep watching. That's what makes it exciting. But it also brings the great rewards when you get it right. But the second is you can minimize those risks, right? This is what teams that like Red Bull and Mercedes in their pomp have been so good at. It's about using the data that you have, using your processes correctly, predicting before the race in your pre-race meetings what the different scenarios might be. You have already put Lewis Hamilton on a hard set of tyres at the beginning of the race. So you know that he is going to be on the faster tyre at the end of the race. You also know that at Miami, there is a high chance of VSCs or full safety cars, which may mean that one or other of your driver is going to be in for a cheap pit stop, which might put Lewis ahead of Charles or into range behind him. That means that he might have a chance of going past him. So there must have been a scenario within your thinking allow you to think that perhaps if that scenario arises, you just move Charles out the way and let Lewis continue with his strategy. And if that isn't happening, that is a big, big problem with the way that you run your strategy. There has to be a way of looking at every single scenario and then coming up with plans for each one of those things. That's what I do in my job. I'm sure it's what you do in your job, Ammar. And I'm sure when we talk to our audience and you guys are thinking about what you do in your own work is a risk reduction exercise. You are trying to predict what the scenarios are going to be and mitigate for them in real time. You shouldn't be thinking about what those things are going to be as it's happening. It should have already happened. And that's what Ferrari failed to do. Lewis shouting and screaming, like that shouldn't even have happened. It should have been immediately, get out the way, Charles, off you go. And in China, what he says about moving out of the way is correct. Ferrari didn't ask him, they didn't have to. But you can imagine that in China, that would have been a similar scenario if Lewis hadn't had the guile to go, okay, I'm going to get out the way and let Charles through. If that's not happening of the driver's own volition, then it's up to the team to have predicted that scenario and let them through. And for me, that no risk is not just about strategy. It's also about how they've gone about technically building this car, right? Fred's messaging is always, we just don't understand the car just yet. There's pace in this car. We just need to unlock it. At no point is there any kind of admission that perhaps we haven't quite got things right at the moment. Yes, we're working on them, but we haven't got them right just yet. That, I think, is a fair assessment. Like, no one's going to criticize you for saying, okay, we haven't quite got it right now, but we're getting there. We're putting the steps in place to get us back towards the front. That's the kind of messaging that you always get from teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren. We haven't got there yet, but we're making the steps to get there. if you can't even admit that there's anything wrong, how can you go forwards? And that, for me, is how Ferrari are falling back into the usual
Yeah,
nonsense that
yeah,
they get into,
yeah,
and
yeah,
where Fred deserves
yeah.
a bit of criticism. Right, I've
Yeah.
gone on long enough,
So
and I'll go
hang
for it.
on. So I do want to peel out a couple of things here. Your first point about paranoia and how they're reacting, I couldn't disagree with it more. Shez, there are several exits between being critical, being criticized, being held accountable, and being fired. There are several exits in between. And so you cannot tell me that this is a false polarity kind of argument where it's either one or the other. Either you're fired or you do great. It can never be that way. It has never been that way. And oh, by the way, you know what? If you're gonna go out, if I'm one of those guys, I want to go out with my own I want to go out shooting my own shot. I don't want to do this thing where we're kind of, just doing whatever kind of happens in the moment. And Shez, you are 100% correct. You kind of have to react in the moment when it comes to racing because it is dynamic. We saw McLaren struggle too with this. So it's not unique to Ferrari. Frankly, it's not unique to anyone else either. Like it happens with Red Bull too. The only difference is they have one driver, so it really doesn't matter in a sense. The the point, Ches, is they do not prepare for races. What you're saying is 100% true in that I guarantee you they came in, and this was Fred's quote after qualifying. They were hoping for rain. That was their strategy. They were hoping for rain that would equalize the race somehow, and I have no guarantee that that would have even done anything for their race positively, right? And Shez, again, even if you didn't do your homework there, the second you change strategy with Lewis in the virtual safety car, it's over. You don't even need to think anymore. And again, Shez, I remind you, they were P7 and P8 at that point. They're not fighting for a race win. They're not even anywhere close to a podium. You know how far Alex Albon was at that point? He was gone. There was no way he was going to get there. So it doesn't even matter. And Shez, so let me come back to what you said about how they're developing the car. You and I had this heated discussion in the context of Lewis Hamilton. Was it a week ago? I don't know, some thereabouts. And I said to you repeatedly, why have they changed 99% of the car? Why? Why have they changed 99%? And you told me, and I know this was their quote, maybe it was Fred or somebody from within Ferrari said, well, they just realized that they couldn't develop the SF24 anymore. And there it is, Shez. That is the epitome of mediocrity, of incompetence. That's what that is. Because look at what McLaren did. They took the fastest car. Ferrari was second fastest or third fastest, however you want to put that. And they said, well, let's see how we can work with these tires because these tires are really hard to work with. There's deg issues, there are tire temp issues. They have magically fixed all of whether it's legal or illegal. I mean, for crying out loud, Ferrari, do something illegal for a change. I don't even care. Like at least just give us the joy of having a podium, right? Like, and so they didn't do that, Ches. And they went all in with changing 99% of the car. And Ches, you cannot sit up here and tell me that that was a stroke of genius. That is them just saying, well, bleep it. Let's just throw something at the wall, see what sticks. If it sticks, it's great. And that is symptomatic of what you hear race after race. Now, 6 races, Shez, I mind you. This is the common theme every time that Charles is talking about, Lewis is talking about, Fred is, we're trying to understand the car. We're trying to unlock some pace. We're trying. What is trying? What does it mean to try? I don't know what it means to try, Shez. That's like me telling you I'm going to lose weight and just sit around on my ass the whole day. And I'm trying. Well, I'm trying to what? Put on my shoes? What does trying look like? What does it actually look like? It looks like nothing. It looks like absolutely. So you come in with a car that you don't understand. You have shown to be incapable of developing the car throughout the season. Need I remind you what happened in Spain last year? So they're going to come to Imola with some kind of upgrades, and I guarantee you they're going to go more backwards, or they're not going to improve. You can take that and bet. I'm not a betting man, but wherever there's a betting chance, go and bet there. They're not going to be anywhere close to a podium, and they're going to get the wrath of Italians over there, which they should get. They deserve that completely. Chess, in leading up to this weekend, they threw out all this stupidity with the new livery and everything, and this is how they thank their sponsors. This is how they thank. It's incompetence and it's unacceptable. And you're right. Fred deserves a lot of this for it. I used to think that he used to come in these press conferences and try to die things down. I just don't think he understands it. I'm convinced now that that he doesn't fully understand what's going on, and he's just afraid of admitting it that they got it wrong with the car. That's just it. Just say it. And this is, you're right, Shez. This is what Mercedes do. This is what Red Bull do. This is what championship winning teams do. I remember last year Toto saying, or is it 2 years ago, we have no idea what to do with the car. Like, and just say it. And Shez, I remind you again, when this rule set started in 22, Ferrari had the luxury of developing the car for at least a year before, maybe even 2 years before, right? They and Red Bull and Mercedes are fighting till the last lap in AD 21, and they are still figuring the car out in the last year of the regulation. So when you change 99% of your car in the last year, that means you do not know what you're doing. There is just no way around it. Absolutely no way. It's just, it's like you and I. Like we're just, oh, okay, let's try this, let's try that, let's try, oh, maybe something will work. And even if it works, Shez, here's the thing. Fred Visser comes here and says, oh, we were the fastest car in Jeddah. Based on what? Based on what, Shez? And what difference does it make that you were the fastest car? It means nothing if you're not able to compete for wins. And they look like they cannot compete for it in any phase of racing.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the conversations that they're having internally are not the same as the conversations that we're having with Fred in press conferences.
Really?
Because the problem that we've got is that it doesn't, as you say, suggest that they're making any progress forward. Look, I don't have a problem with them changing stuff on the car. I think if they're saying that they had reached a ceiling in terms of how much they could progress with the car, I'm
Shez, that car was second fastest.
Yeah.
It's not. It's one thing for you to say, okay, we were middling, we were in the middle of nowhere. Let's go ahead and change it because what do we have to lose? That was a top three car.
But the problem is that taking the top three car from Abu Dhabi and transplanting it into 2025 would mean a backward step. It's the oldest rule in Formula One is that if you're,
I don't
if you
believe
stay
they
the
couldn't
same,
have developed the car. I don't believe they couldn't have
but
developed.
I'm
They
not-
could
I'm-
have worked on
yeah, but
tires.
I'm not,
But
I'm
this
not
is my point, Shez. If
I'm not
it's
an
Mercedes
engineer, am
saying
I?
that, no, I agree with. Neither am I. But if this is Mercedes telling you the same thing,
Mm.
it's Red Bull. You can buy that. Ferrari have given you no reason to buy that, and that's my point. Like
Why?
how?
Why did you say that?
How have they developed the car last year?
Well,
Look
they
at them.
did, but they did, didn't
They
they?
corrected eventually, right?
Correct.
That's what I'm
Not
saying.
just,
But it's
Ammar,
too late.
not just eventually. Yes, they had a 3 or 4 race blip, but ultimately, after that, their trajectory was a winning one. They had the fastest car at the end of the season. That's why they were able to compete in the way that they did. But if they turn around and say, look, we didn't have anywhere else to go, they're going to have their own simulations and their own wind tunnel data that says we cannot get any further performance out of this concept. And it wasn't even a concept. They've changed the mechanical platform to make it a bit more compliant in response to what the drivers told them that they thought that they needed. And those are the drivers that were incumbent, might I add. But that in and of itself, I don't have a problem with. What I have a problem,
It's the application of it. Yeah.
yeah, my problem is the way that the messaging is coming out now. And if what they're saying in public is what is the conversations that they're having in private as well, which is, we can't do anything about it. You know, we couldn't.
I mean, Fred Vasseur has the nerve to tell us that they were 48 seconds behind McLaren, and that was just fine. Like he has a nerve. Like that's my point, Shez. You at what point? Okay, fine. I agree with everything you say. When is the improvement going to come? And does it matter? What are we going to be fighting for? P3?
I mean, ultimately, I don't know. But as I say, the processes are the problem here. How are they using the data that they have in front of them? How are they collecting the data? What data is it they've got in front of them that is telling them that what they have in their car, the fact that they've had to raise the ride height, what is it that they have coming through that's telling them that it's just about the window? We need to get the window right, the setup right, and we're forwards. That's the bit that I don't understand. And the problem is that the strategy and operation side of it is exactly the same. They are not using the data that they have. It is literally about doing your homework. The scenario that they had on Sunday was not one that they could not have predicted. It was a very obvious scenario, and yet they fluffed their lines. And that's inexcusable. Those two things go together. There is abject conservatism within that team because they are scared of getting things wrong. They're scared
That's
of
not an
making a
excuse
mistake.
anymore.
No,
It is not
it's
an
never been.
it's not.
It's
Shez, when
never
you
been
have
an
to
excuse, Ammar.
when you have to
I'm
ask
not
Charles
saying
if
this,
he can
Ammar.
go faster.
I am not
I know.
saying this as
I
a.
know. I know.
I'm
You're
not saying
not,
it as a
but
compliment. I am saying it is the wrong thing to do. It is, but it is a story as old as time when it comes to Ferrari, because they are so scared of being backstabbed. As soon as look, I always go back to the story from Total Competition, right? The one that the book that Ross Brawn wrote. He says that when he came in, one of the engineers had made some little mistake about some nut or bolt on a gearbox, and they had lost a race because of it. They fired the engineer. They literally hung, drew, and quartered that engineer there and then. That was the first thing that they needed to change. But they seem to have gone in this. They've gone to like another extreme, but now they just won't make any. They won't make any decisions. That's what you saw playing out in real time on the racetrack. But I think we do need to move on because we're talking about this for 25 minutes. We need to do a quick one on McLaren, especially Lando and Oscar. I watched that. I was on the edge of my seat. I thought it was absolutely freaking brilliant. I just want to know what your thoughts were.
are we talking about turn 1, turn 2? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm talking about the whole first half of the race. Everything that came from the start, I thought was absolutely box office.
It was box office. It was fun. I think we were close to seeing a crash there. No. And I have to tell you this. I mean, we have come on here over and over again and praised Max. That was not a good move. I understand it was legal. There's a difference between something being legal and something being right. Max would not have felt good had Lando gone into the wall. He would not have felt good. And I'm starting to grow a little bit wary of it. I get that Max wants to be feisty and he wants to fight the way it is, but it cannot be you move or we crash. It just cannot. I mean, one of these days it is going to happen, and we're all going to be sitting here saying that this should not happen. So look, perfectly legal, I guess. It's first lap one. He was not in control of his car there, Shez. He just was not, and that's just not the right thing to do. And I'm starting to wonder if he just hates Lando. Like, is this a case of keep your friends close, keep your enemy closer? Because I thought Lando and Max were best buddies, and he seems to be hell bent
no,
on
I didn't think it
on
was that.
squeezing my.
But his defense against Oscar Piastri was just as robust. If that had been Oscar on the outside of him into turn 2, I think you would have done exactly the same thing. And I agree. I don't really believe all of this oversteer nonsense. I could see that there was a bit of a wiggle, but I don't think a driver of Max's caliber is necessarily going to have that moment at that moment. So I think everything that happened there was completely deliberate. But for me, look, you can look at Max Verstappen in one of two ways, right? You can either look at it as he is the worst thing in Formula One. He's making it really difficult to overtake, and like all of his moves are just really dangerous, and they're not in the spirit of how we want to go racing. Or you can look at Max Verstappen as very, very clever. He looks at what the rules say, and he does. He works just within those rules, and what he has then become is a puzzle to unlock. The boss at the end of your video game. That is what other drivers are now trying to solve. And Oscar, I thought, did that brilliantly. Okay, it took him 14 laps, but he got past.
It took him time. Yeah.
He got past Kimi, but then he had 3 laps. This is the first time we've had a prolonged period where we've got Oscar versus Max, and I thought he did himself really proud. I thought the way that he drove was exquisite. Like he didn't go for the big lunge either on the outside or the inside. He waited when he had done half a move, but it wasn't going to come off and he was going to go off. He backed out of it in a way that you've never seen Lando do. And then he teed him up absolutely brilliantly. Once he'd learned what he needed to get out of Max, what he needed, he knew that Max was always going to be covering that inside line. He found a way to get round him on the outside. That move where he forces Max to take the inside line into turn 17, compromising his exit, meaning that he's up alongside him, even if it's on the outside into turn 1, and then gets alongside of him, pinching him into that apex. and compromising his turn in and exit, meaning that he induced Max Verstappen into having a lockup. That was what was worked out over the 2 or 3 laps preceding. Brilliant to watch, because then you then contrast that with Lando, who took an equal 3 laps ultimately to get past him, but the optics of it were just so completely different. He had 2 moves where one on the outside he gets pushed out again, and one on the inside where he overtakes off the track and has to give the place back again. And fine, the result was the same, but there was a certain desperation in the way that Lando was going about racing. And somebody criticised me in the last video saying that I hate Lando. Look, it's not about me hating Lando. It's just the same thing happens every single time. I am consistently seeing the same thing and criticising it in exactly the same way. And the fact that Oscar was able to unlock that puzzle without going off track, without being bundled out of a corner, but using the pace that he had. This is what he said afterwards. Ultimately, I knew I had the pace in that car, means that he got ahead. I will caveat all of this, and Ammar, I'll hand it over to you in a second, but I will caveat this by saying that Oscar's job was made a little bit easier by the fact that Lando was having to get through 4 cars before he got to him. So there was a bit less pressure on him. And once he got ahead, suddenly Lando is in this position where he has to get past Max now. Otherwise, his title rival, his teammate in the same car, is bombing off down the road. And we know that that's what transpired, because when he finally gets past Max, he's 8-9 seconds worse off than Oscar is. So I understand the desperation, but it's not like Lando hasn't been there before. It's not like his team haven't told him what his teammate just did to get past Max Verstappen. That's what frustrates me about Lando, is that all of the information is there, the talent is there, the pace is there, but in wheel-to-wheel combat with the same driver who does the same thing to him every single time, he doesn't learn. And surely that is something that is worthy of criticism.
I don't think so. I think look, we in general, and not me, I will take myself out of this because I'm a fan of Lando. He's not my favorite driver, but I certainly love his ability to be as transparent and lay himself out there. And I think he probably shouldn't do that. The reason I think we are applying different lenses with how Oscar overtook Max and how Lando overtook Max is not just because of past history between Norris and Max. It's also because we view them through different lenses. Oscar is always looked at as a calm, collected, cool guy, perception wise, right? And he's not going to get into it, and he's still going to be sharp but fair, whatever. We've already applied a lens to Lando because of the battle that happened last year and the fact that Lando criticizes himself publicly as well. And so to that extent, I think there's a little bit of that. I think both moves were about as equal as they could be, right? And Shez, I would just say that it's easy for us to sit up here and say, well, do exactly what Oscar did, but it took him a while to set that up. And we don't know if he got any coaching or not. We never were able to hear any of the radio that Oscar got or not. So he probably also did benefit from a little bit of coaching that probably never got played out in the media. I don't have a problem with the team helping the driver too. And look, Max races the British guys, I should say, with a particular venom. It's just there. I don't know what to say there. I don't want to say. But Shez, I'll tell you.
I'm not. I can't agree with that.
Hang on. I'm saying this. You don't have to say anything to this. You don't have to say anything. I'm not saying there's any kind of bias or anything like that. But you can tell. I mean, again, that lap 1, those first couple turns, that is just too much. That was just too much. I mean, and I get that he was being desperate. I mean, look how far behind he fell. Now, the thing that I will give you there is Lando should have been a little bit smarter there, and he should have realized, look, I have the quicker car. I'm ahead of my teammate at that point. Let's just play this out a little bit further and kind of see it. But I also don't blame him for making that move because Max was clearly not in control of his car and he had gotten essentially side by side. I know it was not as side by side as the rules dictate, but he was right there. So what was he supposed to do? If he went for the move and this happened, we're here to criticize him. If he didn't go for the move, we'd have said, see, look, they couldn't really make it happen and had to rely on a faster car to get ahead. So it's a damn if you do, damn if you don't kind of thing. I really do.
Ammar, the problem is he has a faster car and he is not making use of it. So,
but Shez, if he makes that, so let's say he plays out your scenario, which is maybe pull back a little bit, wait to fight another day, and maybe catches Max at the end of the first lap, or maybe even the second lap, or
I
two laps.
definitely would not have been criticizing him.
I'm
Like
not saying
in
you
that,
would be criticizing. I think that
but
I'm not saying you
ultimately
would be.
that's the only view that he should care about is us talking about him.
No, no,
Surely.
I'm just saying that most of the Lando critics would come back and say, "Oh, look, it was a fast car. He couldn't really
Okay,
overtake Max
but
in the first
okay, but
turn."
Ammar,
That's what
I'm not here to just criticize Lando. I don't have an agenda against Lando.
I'm
It's
not
not.
saying you do.
It,
You
it's,
absolutely don't.
right, so that's where you need to understand where I'm coming from because I'm not trying to undermine him and say that everything he does is bad. But that wasn't the right move in that scenario. If he had backed off, I would have been absolutely his loudest supporter. I would have said that was a
All right.
great thing to do. In the same way that anyway, so
I'm gonna have you put a "I love Lando" sticker on your head for the next time he does exactly what you
it's
want.
because I just care about him. But
I'm just telling you based
that's where
on.
this is coming from. And my problem with the argument here is that look, this isn't about Max driving against British drivers differently. Lewis Hamilton, when he was in 2021, got shoved off the track more times than
Yeah,
I care to remember.
yeah.
But by the end of the season, he had understood what he needed to do, and he was
I
able to get the better of Max Verstappen. Just look at that Saudi Arabian race, right? He just didn't get
look.
sucked into the nonsense. But Lando, despite having a season now, pretty much, to understand how to battle this guy, still does the same thing again and again and again and again. And that's why I have a problem.
Shez,
Not because I
I
hate
would just tell
Lando.
you that the Oscar move was brilliant because it worked. It could, and the thing was also that they were going back and forth for 2 or 3 laps. So at some point, Max was going to give in at some point. So it was going to look brilliant eventually anyway. So I don't look at that as if Oscar would have done that on the first go or the second go. Fair enough. My point is we're overhyping the whole thing. It was a brilliant move,
It
but
was
it
a brilliant
happened
move.
after 2 or 3 laps of going. And so Lando also did the same thing. That's all I'm saying. It's not there. But I would just tell you this again. I just want to kind of clean up what I said, right? Because many of you Maxeratis are going to come after me. Just look at the way he races Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, George Russell, and now look at the way he's racing Oscar Piastri, and look at the way he used to race Charles. There, I don't know what it is. I'm not accusing him of anything. This is racing. I suppose you can have a little bit of a fierce rivalry with certain drivers versus others. But Ches, I would just tell you that the damning indictment on those max overtakes and the first lap incident with Lando is what you saw in the cool down room from the other two drivers, Russell and Piastri. They were both shaking their heads. They all know what's happening here. There's one driver on the grid that wants to exploit every rule to his advantage because he's fighting tooth and nail to get his fifth championship. I do not blame him for him whatsoever. But I will tell you this, one of these days, there's going to be a bad crash happening. And I have to tell you this, Max is responsible for it, not because of what happens in that particular incident, because it is building up. And at some point, someone else that's fighting with him is not going to take it anymore in the heat of the moment. And that's all I'm here to say. That's it.
Oof, I think I can't take this any further. Anyway, as usual, you guys are going to tell me that I
Yeah,
don't
they're
love
going to call
Lando.
us idiots. Yeah.
Um,
And they're going to say I'm going to love Max. So there's that. So we're good.
but that's fine. That's what we're here for. I love hearing those comments. So please leave us as many comments as you want. We'll read every single one. We'll reply to as many as we possibly can. Please like, please subscribe. We will see you guys in the next one.
Later.